Thank you so much for having me, everyone. It's such a treat to be out here. Got to come out from the Valley, and what a special community to be a part of in so many different ways. And tonight, I want to invite you into a bit of an adventure. You can even think about it as a journey. And the reason for that is because I believe that all of us in this room, there's a bunch of things that we share in common. And where I want to start is this idea that I think that we're all doing our very best to navigate life, right? To make decisions that feel really good for ourselves, to understand where we came from and what that means for where we're going, and to have a really meaningful impact on the people around us. And what an amazing group and community to get to share in that experience. Okay, first test on the clicker. Before I dive in, I want to just set the stage with a few encouragements. Anytime that I have the privilege of getting to spend time with any group, I almost want to set the stage. And so these are simple, but really, really important. I want to invite you in with a couple of these encouragements. So the first one is to just find one thing that resonates tonight. Find one takeaway. Sometimes when I come to sessions like this, I'm really trying to take it all in. And sometimes the signal gets lost with all the noise. But generally, there will be one or two things that really resonate with you. It might be something you hear, it might be something you feel, it might be something that someone else says. And so just listen for that one takeaway. When I say listen, I mean with your whole system. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The second one is, like Scott was mentioning earlier, find a moment of connection. And again, that may be a connection to yourself. Those are really important, and sometimes we kind of lose our way and need to find our way back just to connect for a moment. It may also be a moment of connection with someone here, someone you know, and maybe even someone that you're meeting for the first time. And then finally, the last encouragement, and it's a big one, it's what's going to make this night really special, is the power, the magic that happens when groups like this gather. We are all here investing our time and our energy, our attention. And so I want to invite you to be here, first of all, but then to share courageously. Maybe, for me, and there's the feeling like this where there's something deep in your gut, or maybe in your heart, and there's something you want to share. And then what's the next thing that happens? For me, it's like this thing gets in the way. Immediately these stories, whoa. That thing that you are feeling right now that you want to share, don't share that. That is uncomfortable. That could, expose you. What would people think? But it turns out that when we share those things and when we share from that place, I observe two things happening over and over again. The first one is that we learn a little bit about ourselves just by articulating the things that we care about most, right? So we're kind of building our own foundation. The second and more important thing, so what I think is that the foundation of leadership is that there is someone here that needed to hear what you had to say, right? We're going to have these Let's Connect moments. And so I just want to invite you in to really be here to share and to know that there's an opportunity for each of us to have a positive impact and influence on those around us tonight. Okay, so to set the stage and to kind of introduce myself to you all, really to set the stage for the language that I want to share with you tonight. Some of you may have seen it on some of those little handouts. I want to share just a little bit of my story. It's an informing story. It's one of those stories that makes me who I am here today. And to do that, I've got to bring you all the way back to when I was about 9 years old. And I was largely the same stature as I am now, which meant that when I was introduced to this new sport as a little grade 4, grade 5, the sport of basketball, I fell in love. And so here I was playing my first year or two of basketball, and like nothing else in the world mattered. And then one spring, my parents turned on the TV, and some of you may know what this is. We started watching this game, and it turns out that it was this thing called March Madness. It is where the best basketball players in the whole world, down in the States, NCAA Division I, they get together and they play this national championship. So here I am, 9 years old. I don't really know what I'm looking at, but I think, I play basketball. I think I'm pretty good at basketball. I wonder if I could play on that stage. And life is so interesting when we have these little ideas because sometimes we don't share them. But I was so young, I didn't know. I didn't know, for example, in the 1990s that like literally out of 30 million Canadians, not a single person some year had earned a Division I scholarship for basketball. And so that helped me to just communicate it to my parents. I said, hey, like I wonder if I could play there one day. And one of the things we're not going to get to talk a bunch about tonight, but the importance and value of your tribe, your inner circle, those people that know you almost maybe more than you know yourself and where you want to go and what you believe in. Well, my parents were those people for me, and they were probably equally naive to how impossible this was, but they said, okay, let's do it. Let's try. And this started the journey, a 10-year journey for me that changed the course and trajectory of my life. And I want to fast forward a few years and kind of give you a sneak peek of what basically that decade looked like. So by that point, I was in grade 7, going into grade 8, 12 years old, and my high school coach, who was kind of the next person into that inner circle, he came to me and he said, Tyrell, I know that you want this dream, this goal, and you're working towards it. One thing you're going to have to do, because there is no internet, really, there is no YouTube, no social media, no cell phones, way back then, you're actually going to have to go and travel down to the States and go step into the arenas where these kids who also want your scholarship are playing. And then he said, you know what, I've got great news because I found this coach in the States and he's willing to take you for 6 weeks to play. Isn't that amazing? You know, and then he asked me the question, Tyrell, do you want to do it? Are you up for it? And here I am, little, 12, 13-year-old kid, and my head is way too big because I'm this big star, right, going after this big goal. And I said, of course I'm going. Of course I'm going to go down and show all these players who I am. And so, maybe the most interesting part of the story is my coach somehow found a way to convince my parents, and they were also on board with this. So only 3 or 4 weeks later in July, there we all are, driving up to YVR Airport. My parents walking me right up to the gate, which gives you a sense of how long ago it was. And they gave me this little pep talk. They said, Tyrell, like we're so proud of you. A couple things that you need to know as you go on this trip. When you get on the plane, you're flying to Philadelphia. You probably really have no idea where that is, but it's on the other side of the continent in a different country. When you get off the plane, you have to look for a man, big 6'8" man that's holding a sign with your name on it, because that's your coach. Oh, by the way, nobody in my family or my coach, nobody knew who this human was. They had just communicated via phone calls and written letters probably. So they said it's really important because the only human in the whole country of the US that knows you're down here is this coach. You find him. If you can't find him, the next thing you need to look for is a payphone. Because the only way that we are going to be communicating for the next 6 weeks is you picking up a payphone, calling our landline. Hopefully we're home and we can pick up. If we're not, you need to leave a message there. We'll listen to it. We'll leave a message back on the landline. And then every day or so, just call back and try and pick the messages up. This was our entire means of communication. And then they basically said, you're going to do amazing. This is really important, great opportunity. We'll see you in 6 weeks. There I was getting onto the plane, 12 years old, all by myself, to go play in a country that I'd never been before on the other side, on the East Coast, for a coach I'd never met. Turns out I was going to be living and staying in the inner city housing projects in Philadelphia. And I was so young that I didn't really even understand the implications, like what I was getting myself into. But that would come because I got off the plane. Thank goodness my coach was there. Big sign, orange jersey. So I'm like, okay. For those of us who know about the nervous system and our need to feel connected and safe and secure, that was like step 1. Got it. We go to the baggage carousel. Here's where things start taking a bit of a turn because it turns out all my bags are lost. So anything that I'm going to have, right, the teddy bear or the favorite pair of shorts or shoes to call my own, to have a connection back home, that wasn't going to be a part of the first week of this trip. So my coach, I think, who I just met, was kind of, I think, noticing that I was a little bit fidgety, right? I was getting a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. So he said, don't worry, Tyrell. I've got a bag. I've got a couple pairs of shoes, a couple of shorts, jerseys. I got you covered. We're good. Okay, great. Get in the car. We go into the car, and as we're driving to the airport, my coach looks over to me and says, you know what? We're not even practicing for another week in Philadelphia. So I'm actually just going to take you to New Jersey because I got you into this amazing camp, best players on the East Coast. So I'll just drop you off there, and then I'll pick you up in 5 days. and we'll go back to Philadelphia. Yeah, you can see where this is going. So there I was, quite literally 2, maybe 3 hours off of the plane. And I remember standing on the side of the road, looking up at these big cement towers, and the only human that I literally knew was driving off in his SUV. And I had one instruction, which was go into the dorms. The coaches know you're going to be there, and I'll see you in 5 days. I'll save some of the details, but basically I spent the next hour. Have you ever had that feeling where like your tears are like caught in your throat? I was like right on the border of this panic attack. And these coaches were trained to be like drill sergeants. So you go in there and you start getting yelled at, berated, bullied. I ended up walking into a sophomore linebackers room by accident, and they weren't very happy to see me. Needless to say, about an hour later, right, all I wanted was 4 walls and quiet so I could figure out what was going on. And finally, these coaches gave me a key to my own room, literally 12 by 12 feet, cement walls, cement floor, a little steel bed, a little bassinet, a hand sink. And I closed the door and I collapsed on the floor and I cried. And I cried the whole evening, I cried myself to sleep. And for the next several days, I would get up, and first thing in the morning is I would call my parents. And I would beg them to let me come home. Like Division I and March Madness? Are you kidding me? I can't even do 1 day. And this is where things get so interesting in retrospect, because my parents, that tribe, that inner circle, they were able to do something that I think the best people in our life can do. They somehow were able to say the words, the things that like convinced me or maybe kind of tricked me into just surviving 1 more day, right? It was just like 1 more day. Okay, we'll look at flights. Maybe we can get you back, but like that'll take us a day. So like call us back tomorrow. And this interesting thing happened, right? 1 day turned into a week turned into 2 weeks. I was flying all over the country, playing in all these different camps. And then finally, one day I woke up and I realized that I had 1 more flight left. This was the last day, and I was getting on a plane to go from Philadelphia back to Vancouver. Now, I tell this whole story because there was this conversation that I had with myself on the plane. I was sitting in this middle seat, which was uncomfortable, but it didn't even matter because I was so exhausted. And I just had this one little last moment of consciousness where I basically was talking to myself. I said, Tyrell, 6 weeks ago, you literally thought you were going to die. You were laying with your cheek on the cold, hard cement, crying, and it was over. But you didn't die. You're here. You survived, right? And you didn't even just survive. There were moments where you thrived because you stayed long enough. You found a way to persevere. And then the moment or the light bulb that changed my life. Simple, but it was this word back to myself. Tyrell, if you can survive this, what can't you do? And that story, that journey in Philadelphia was just a taste, a sampling of what the next 8 years were going to look like, right? The highest highs and the lowest lows. But about 8 years later, I found myself leading and captaining a team down in Oregon, Portland State, winning a conference championship ring, NCAA Division I, and playing in Omaha, Nebraska in front of 27,000 people in the first round of March Madness. It was amazing. But in the years and decades since, I always come back to that trip to Philadelphia. My life has been wondering about this question. What is it about these goals, these pursuits that we go on that are audacious and scary and daunting, but when we get it right, they're the most important things that we can do? And I want to share with you just a little bit of that framework, that kind of the way that I've been able to build my roadmap and some of the language that I've used to answer this question. Because I realized when I was going through that journey in Philadelphia, this is what I found. I'm going to define this in a second, but I realized it was like you found the deep end of life. And the reason why this is important to me is because I believe we all have this. Our most important and informing journeys and chapters in our life come when we can find this place. And it exists for every single one of us. It's going to look different, but we all have it. And we all have them throughout our lives. And so what is the deep end? It's pretty simple, right? Where we intentionally sign up for a goal, a pursuit, a passion. Maybe it's a chapter of our life where we feel really purpose-driven in what we're doing. You've got to be driven from in here. So our values, our intrinsic drivers, the things that light us up from within, which are very different from what the world tells us. The ego or the status, the extrinsic motivations, sometimes the expectations that we think people want to see of us. And then finally, instead of shying away from the adversity, the challenge, the risk, we embrace it. We know it's just as important to the journey in the deep end as anything else. Now, some people call me crazy. Why would you want to take on all of this? Well, I think these are the outcomes, right? For any of us who have experienced those moments of peak performance or flow where we feel like we're just doing our very best work, that comes in the deep end. For any of us who want to have impact, positive influence on the work that we do, maybe we want to build really meaningful work throughout the course of our life. That's called mastery. You need time in the deep end to accomplish that. And then finally, the most important thing is, if you were to think about someone that's like fighting for their life in the deep end, pursuing what they care about, overcoming challenges and adversity, and compare that to the person that's sitting in the comfort of the sidelines, who do you think has the most opportunity to learn and grow? So we create all this great growth and learning potential. At the end of the day, the deep end is this environment where we're fighting for our lives, right? Every day and moments in the day can be really hard. Sometimes it's weeks or months or years, and maybe some of you are thinking back to those chapters. But when we catch a moment, we're going to talk about this at the very end, right? When we just find a moment back of connection, maybe we pinch ourselves because we're so glad we're here. We wouldn't trade it for the world. It's this incredible dichotomy of challenge and almost euphoria of I'm so lucky that I get to do this, that all of my energy puts me right here to be present. And when we look back on these chapters of our lives, we realize that they hold the most growth, the most learning, the things that become most important to who we are as we walk through life. Here's the next part of my journey, right? I thought, okay, I found this thing. It's called the deep end. I know what it looks like. I've gotten back there a couple times, really hard, but wow, do I grow? Wow, do I learn? Why do I gain confidence in myself? We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but there's a problem. Because if getting there was easy, right, everyone would be doing it. But the deep end is hard. It's not only hard to identify sometimes, like what pool am I going to dive into, but then it's even harder to get there. And there's a really important reason for that. And I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about what goes on inside of us when we think or we dream about these things, right? When we think about signing up for something that's really important, which then inevitably is going to be a little bit audacious, a little bit scary. Some of you all may know where we're going with this. Because it turns out that before you ever get the privilege, earning the right to swim in the deep end, you've got to do these two really scary things. You've got to escape your comfort zone, and you've got to climb up that big high dive. And there's a really important thing that happens with our brain, and I'm going to try and restrict myself from going too far down into this, but in our heads, we can think about, I want to accomplish this goal just like me, NCAA Division I, sure, I'm going to go do that. But we have, and that's our prefrontal cortex, right? The part of our brain that we think is so smart, our decision-making, our executive function, I'm pointing up here because it's the front of our head. But we have this little bitty part of our brain called our amygdala. Some of you may have heard this, right? Our amygdala is really important for having us here, surviving as a species. Right? When we see a lion or we're put in real threat and danger, our amygdala is the thing that gets us out of it. But there's a really big problem because all day long, each of our amygdalas in our brains are like surveying the landscape. All the data that's coming in through your body, both whether you think it or feel it or you see it and it comes in like a sensory input. And all your amygdala is doing is saying, is there risk? Is there uncertainty? Am I going to die? Right? Do I need to run? And it turns out that there is no difference from that lion or saber-toothed tiger and the thought of, I want to go and accomplish that thing, right? Your amygdala sees that risk, uncertainty, fear, possibly going to be failure, and boom, within 20 milliseconds, it doesn't even consult our big thinking brain. It just says, nope, I'm going to flood the entire body with all these chemicals that make us feel fear, stress, anxiety. We've probably all felt this before. right? And before you know it, because despite this thing being so powerful, it takes a long time for everything to get back to the body. It actually takes sometimes 200 milliseconds. So 20 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds. You can start to play through the implications of, I think about this thing, I'm really excited about it, my amygdala triggers that, it's called a limbic hijack, right? Basically hijacks your whole body. And then only 10 times later do you start acknowledging the feelings and sensations inside of your body. And there's this connection that is risky that we're at risk of making, which is, oh, I thought of that thing and now I feel terrible, right? I need to get as far away from that thing that's scaring me as possible, right? And our amygdala can kind of trick us back into comfort. That's actually what it's doing all the time. That's its job. It's like this outdated operating system. There's one last piece to this that I just want to share briefly, which is our hippocampus, right? So that's that blue wrapping line. And the simple, oversimplistic view is like our hippocampus, it remembers and it reminds us. Its job is to remember what happened and what decision did we make, and then what was the result of that, and it stores it. And then anytime something similar like that happens, it reminds us. It floods our body back with those, it's like a shortcut. Right? It just knows to trigger the same response. So our brain is being efficient. And so you start to see where our decision around what we do when we're about to jump after something and we experience these feelings is really, really important. In some ways, when you're at that precipice of climbing up the high dive or about to jump into the deep end, your choice in that moment, by the way, this happens every single day, and it happens related to the big journeys that we go on in like 5, 10 years. And there's no difference. What we choose to do really matters. It's one thing for me to talk about this, right? What's happening in our brain, but it's always fun to see it and a little bit intimidating to see it happen. Some of you may have seen this video. This is called a 10-meter tower. Volunteers were basically asked, hey, do you want to go and climb up a 10-meter high dive that's 40 feet, so it's really high, and jump off? And we're just going to videotape you. So volunteers, voluntarily doing this, and watch what happens, despite our big prefrontal cortex saying, yeah, I can do this. How powerful this little part of our brain is. And we feel this inside ourselves all the time. And some of these are really effective little strategies that they're doing, right? We're trying to almost trick our brains out of that. But what we do matters, right? There's a part of our brains that is going to remember and remind. But if we can find a way to talk ourselves into it, maybe to trick ourselves. That's where life happens. By the way, the beautiful part about this roadmap for me in my life is that it is archetypal and it's so accessible. So for any of us who have young people in our lives, kids, nieces, nephews, friends, they feel the same things. But it's like we have to be able to have that conversation with one another. So like this is my daughter, Olea, when she was like 4 or 5 years old, jumping into the 5-degree pool at my parents' place, right? And we talk about these things. What does it mean? Are you gonna do it? Are you not gonna do it? Watch her body language. She knows that she can do things that challenge her and scare her because of moments like that. So we can start to have these conversations. And the point here with this second portion of the roadmap is that when we do the work to really align our foundation, what we care and what we believe in, those inner passions, those values, with where we think we'd like to go in the future, we get to redefine our relationship with fear. And it doesn't get any more uncomfortable, and it doesn't get any more scary, but we can start to teach ourselves that that feeling of fear, it's a signal. You don't run from it, you actually go right through it, right off the edge of the high dive. This is the question, I didn't want to ask it during the reflection, but it's just something worth thinking about. Because sometimes I personally get caught in this trap of like, the thing is so scary. And yet when we juxtapose the real question of, what is the worst, think about the worst failure. And that probably is pretty daunting. But then think about if you never leave the comfort zone again. Your brain remembers and reminds and remembers and reminds. And every day that goes on, those walls in the comfort zone, they grow, right? Think about the risk relative to doing nothing. And sometimes that's all it takes to be like, yeah, of course it's going to scare me. This is where life happens. Okay, we get to go into our last little portion of the roadmap. This is the last step because we've got this great navigation from our comfort zones up the high dive into the deep end, stay there for as long as we can. But there's one thing that's missing, and this thing that's missing is so important. It took me a long time to learn this, the painful way, almost always, which is growth doesn't happen in the deep end. I think about it in my life like when we go and train or exercise or lift weights, right? If you're in the gym or you're out running, your body's not getting stronger. Your body's actually being torn physically apart, right? Your muscles are tearing. And we all know when we grow, when we get stronger, it's when we rest, when we eat and drink good food, right? We nourish ourselves, and when we sleep. And I fundamentally believe our journey, our navigation through life is no different. We grow when we give ourselves the permission to pause, and that can be one of the hardest things to do in the world that we live in right now, the world that tells us you got to keep going and moving and posting and grinding and hustling. Paradigm shifting, transformational, inflection point, learning and growth come in the pause. I didn't know how to do this when I was growing up. It's not a brag, but I was able to hospitalize myself 4 times before the time that I graduated high school by literally grinding myself into the ground because I wanted that Division I goal. And I was worse off for it, but I had no tools. I didn't know what the pause is. And so I want to leave us with this question of how do we pause well? We're going into a season of pause, of slowing down, of reflection to get ready for the new year. These are the last few slides, but they're so important. We talked about this big roadmap, right? The big navigational steps. But there's this whole other game that's at play. Where I think about it as our toolkit. What's happening every single day? And I believe that we have these 4 systems, and they're always working. A lot of times they're working for us. Sometimes they can start working against one another. If we don't take care of them, they really start taking everything down with them. Right? They are doing a job, our brain, our body, our heart, and our nervous system, but they are also trying to keep us alive. And when we don't take care of them, when we don't nurture and nourish and connect with these systems, that's what starts happening. And I believe in this so much, I'm gonna get a little passionate for a second, that we host all these great experiences out in the valley at the Wellness Den, it's our facility, and then people come, they have a great experience, and then they leave, and nothing happens, right? We can't sustain these little bits of work. And that's where transformation actually comes. It's not when we're here, it's what we do after here. And so, I work with some folks one-on-one, and I literally am checking with them every day, right? Did you meditate? Did you write down your gratitudes? Did you plan for the day? How did you connect with your nervous system? What filled your heart with joy? But not all of us have maybe that person or those people in our lives, so I literally created like these little workbooks that you see floating around because I was like, maybe just this little bit of accountability will change things, because I believe that when we take care of these systems and we can sustain these little practices for 30, 60, 90 days, our life changes. The problem is that they are so simple, they're so small, they're not easy, they're simple, that they're the first things to get swept off the plate for every single one of us. And it's this idea, I didn't share it at the beginning, but this concept of a 1% trajectory change, right? If you think about the path that you're walking on right now, if you just changed it by 1 degree, so tiny, and you walked on that path for 30 days, you could literally look over the field and you'd see the other path, because 1 degree really isn't that much. Think about adding something to your life as that 1% change, that 1 degree change. Fast forward that path a year, 5 years, a decade, and you end up on a different continent. So it's this powerful concept, but not very many people are able to sustain it because it's hard. It's hard to stay committed. And so hopefully you all have those little cards. Those are reminders for what I'm just going to share at a very high level. Just touching on these systems. I want to almost plant some seeds as you go into the season of reflection. If you don't have a card, come talk to me after. Right, our physical body, Its job is to give us energy every day. How well we take care of this is like our starting point at the beginning of every day. We've got a lot of days, so this actually matters a lot. The ways to take care of it are pretty simple, I think. You can go down a rabbit hole on any of these, but we need to sleep well, and we need to prepare for sleep well. What you do in the 2 to 3 hours before you lie down actually matters a lot. What we put in our bodies, moving every single day, this is like a massive link to creative problem solving, skill retention and acquisition, right? All this data supports these things. And then finally, how you start and end your days is everything. This is the first principle. We can't do any of the other things unless we get this right, and we just take care of this every single day. Our brains are plastic. That means they're malleable. They change, and we can change them, but it's a use it or lose it system. If we are not doing things every day to build our brains up, to build resilience in the brains, to take care of the neural pathways that we want to have fire and wire, then usually what's going to happen is things that are easy, fast, take no effort, they start to creep in. Some of you may know what this looks like, right? It's that little device that's in all of our pockets, rewiring our brains every day. 3 things that you can think about. Microdose discomfort. Do something that's a little bit challenging. Climb up that high dive and jump into the deep end every single day. Starting the day with a cold shower or jumping into a cold body of water, that does it, right? It's so simple. That helps us build resilience in the brain. The second one is we need to think about our attention. Where is our attention going? Here, grab it. I can send these out after, by the way. Right where our attention goes, our whole systems follow and they flow. Meditation is still by far the best tool I've found to build that fortress of attention in our minds. Simple, not easy. And then finally, for those of you who are pursuing something, your brain does not know the difference whether you visualize perfection, that perfect rep, that perfect presentation, or that perfect thing happening in the future, or if you actually do it. So every day we can visualize, we can start to plan how we want to show up, how we want to perform. Our heart pumps, it keeps us alive, right? It keeps the blood circulating. It actually has a brain sitting on top of it. There's a bunch of neurons on our heart called our intrinsic nervous system, and they send signals out to the rest of the body. When we're dysregulated, when we're frustrated, right, we're disconnected, our heart starts to become erratic, the beats. And when we can find our way back to things that are positive, appreciation, joy, care, it's called coherence, and it starts this cascade of communication to the rest of the body. The ways that I think about this are like, how do you find something every day that gives you joy, gives you gratitude? Have you ever been walking down a path and you just notice something, the sunset, a spider spinning its web, and you actually just stop and watch it? That's called awe and wonder. We find that in nature, and we find that in the amazing people around us. And finally, you have to know who's in your tribe. Who are those loving social relationships? It's exactly what Mark was sharing earlier, right? Building those relationships. There's science and data that back up how important that is in the work that you all are doing. And finally, our nervous system. The nervous system is the king or queen. It is the arbiter of our experience every single day, whether you feel amazing or you are traveling down that dark negative spiral. It's your nervous system. And I believe one of the things that we all have an opportunity to do, not only for ourselves, but for our communities, is find our way back. Find our way back to connection with what's going on in here. We can do that in really simple ways. Our breath, which we're going to get to practice for a few minutes here at the end. Our nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, kind of like I was talking about our amygdala, except it's looking for, am I safe? Am I secure? Am I connected? And unless we have those things inside of us and in our outside external landscape, we go into states of protection. So there's lots of little tools that we can find to be connected to the outside world and to build ourselves up internally. Those actually make a difference. Our nervous system is listening to that. And then finally, sometimes the journey just starts with paying attention. How do I feel and why? Where is that coming from? Not with judgment, not with shame or doubt or fear or insecurity or anxiety, but just an observation. And it's hard and scary and intimidating, but that's where the work starts for us to find our way back to connection. When you find your way back to connection, anything is possible. Last full slide. This is it. Because I really want to send you all off. I don't know when I'm going to get to see you all again. And so it's really just thinking about how do you set up for a great pause going into 2025. Again, these are slides that can be sent out, but be intentional. Think and plan about where are you going to find these pockets and moments, maybe every day, every week, every month, every quarter. Connect and nourish those systems every single day. The whole point of that handout was to give you a reminder of those things and some ideas of how you can do that. For some of us, like me, it might just start with giving yourself the permission, because you've never done that before. All right, that was at least 10 years, 15 years of my life. We have to actually just, remove everything, sit and be still, and also be okay with what comes up. Structure is really important. I've been journaling since I've been about 9 years old, when that whole journey started to deal with my own internal introverted mind, like, kind of documenting and processing. But I realized that a lot of us aren't taught how to journal, how to reflect. And so these are some questions that can help you. And then finally, you have to think about integrating your learnings, right? So I think about this as building back into my foundation, but somehow you have to articulate for yourself, what did you learn, why is it important, and how is it going to change your navigational compass and your roadmap in the future? Because that's where we start to connect the dots from the experiences that we came from in the past and how that informs where we go, right? What the next deep end is in the future. Okay, we're going to shift gears one last time. Perfect timing. One of the things that I love to do with any event, any engagement, is to get our heads going and then to give you the permission to let it all go. Okay, your brain has done the work. We're going to end with a short guided meditation. If everyone's okay with it, if everyone's comfortable with it. I talked about meditation and attention, meditation and connection to the breath and the nervous system. But honestly, this is just a nice way to pause and to sit and to just feel your body and let all the stuff that you've been thinking about, all the things that I've been sharing about, go. Is everyone up for that? Okay, I'm going to get some music going, and all I want you to do right now as I'm doing that is just get comfortable wherever you are. And it might mean adjusting in your chair a little bit. Or out. Just settle in. Yes, lights, perfect. And even maybe it just starts with a big breath. A yawn, a sigh. And wherever you're sitting, just take a moment to feel yourself settled in. And if you haven't already, you can close your eyes. And before we even talk about breathing or visualizing, it is just about being here. Just give yourself the permission to be right here. Maybe it's feeling your feet connected to the ground, your seat in the chair, your back resting. All of these things signal to our nervous system that we are safe, we are connected. When you're ready, I'd like us to take 3 breaths together. We'll start with an inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Another inhale through the nose, down into your belly. Let it all out, exhale. One more inhale, all the way down. And let it all go. And maybe you feel yourself sink a little bit further into the chair. And over the next few breaths, I just want you to find a rhythm that feels like home for you today. You can think about breathing in through your nose for 3 or 4 seconds, and then out through your mouth or your nose for 5 or 6 or 7 seconds, a little bit longer. And at the end of that exhale, see if you can just find a little moment of complete stillness. You see, we run so fast in life from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. But we grow when we pause. And there is a small little pause in between every single breath we take. We need to give ourselves the permission to just sit in that pause. And then you can transition into that next breath in through the nose for 3 or 4 seconds, out through the mouth. Stay with that breath. And if you're like me, by now, your brain may have been pulled in 10 different directions. The to-dos, the worries, the things that insert themselves, pull our attention away. Something that's always worked well for me is picturing in my mind a simple visualization where I'm walking through the forest, maybe down a path. I can even hear some of the birds. I can feel the cool breeze, the sun beaming through the trees. And then as I come around a corner, I can hear the river before I see it. This beautiful, gurgling little stream. And I walk all the way down the path, right to the water's edge. And I notice there's a little boat right by my feet. I visualize myself bending down, taking whatever that story is, whatever the to-do, the worry, the doubt. And I actually picture myself placing that thing in the boat and then giving the boat a little nudge out to the river. And immediately I see it start to pick up steam, get caught up in the current, starts floating downstream. And as I stand up and I back away a couple of steps, I already feel a little bit lighter. The boat's getting smaller and smaller, and then just as it's about to disappear around the corner, I take a nice breath in through my nose and let it all go as it disappears. And then I simply come back to the breath. 3 seconds in through the nose, down deep into the belly. Maybe a little bit longer on the exhale, 5 or 6 seconds. And then that little moment of stillness. That little pause between each breath. And I want you to know that that forest and that path and that river and that boat are there for you whenever you need it. Whenever you need to let go. Stay with that breath. We're going to move our attention one more time during this meditation. I want you to take all of that energy and awareness, and I want you to bring it up to your head. Maybe even just take a moment and a breath, appreciating everything that happens between our ears, all the work that happens up there. Maybe there's a breath where you soften a little bit behind your jaw, your neck, around your eyes. Then I want you to bring that attention inside your mind. And I want you to picture something that you are truly grateful for today. I want you to bring to life a picture of something that is there for you no matter what. The highest highs, the lowest lows, this thing is always there. It is your anchor. And if you can, bring it together, bring it to life in as much clarity as possible. It may be a person, a place, a thing, an experience, a memory. And I want you to pay attention. Where are you? Who's there with you? What are the expressions on your face and the face of others? What does the air feel like? Just spend 1 or 2 more breaths holding that picture in your mind. And then I want to see if we can transition that thing from a picture in your mind to a feeling or sensation in your body. And for me, it's always helpful to connect this with my breath, where I transition it down from my brain, maybe into my heart, my chest, my gut. What does it feel like to have that thing in your life? To know that gratitude is there. See if you can experience the sensations of that in your body. Sometimes it can feel like warmth radiating out from your heart. Sometimes it can be joy, euphoria, grace, humility. And see if with the next few breaths you can just let that sensation course through your body. Let it expand to touch every finger and every toe. When we take the time to appreciate the good things in our life, the good things in our life continue to appreciate, and we can always find our way back. When you're ready, you can let that sensation and you can let that picture just fade away. And we're going to end this meditation with 3 breaths together, just like we started. So clear out that last breath, and we'll take a nice inhale in through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. You can let it all out and sigh. Another inhale deep into the belly through the nose. And let it all out. One last inhale in through the nose, and let everything go on the exhale. And with your next couple of breaths, you're welcome to just slowly make your way back. You can start wiggling your feet and your hands. Open your eyes. And slowly come on back. Thank you. Good job, everyone. Before we close, or as we're closing, I know I'm taking some risks doing this. I just want to open it up. If anyone is interested or willing or feels almost like compelled to share how they feel right now or how they felt during that meditation. It can be a word, a sentiment. Go for it.
I feel large safe.
Safe. Awesome. Great word. What other words come up? Thank you. Thanks, Misha.
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Love it. Thank you.
Fun.
Calm. Nice.
Connected.
Connected. Love it. Steph. Reflected.
Like reflect. Reflected.
Reflected. I like it.
Goodbye.
Amazing. Sometimes we need to get out of our heads and into our bodies, and that's where the learning is. So first of all, I just want to thank each and every one of you. Doing that is not always comfortable. It's not always easy, both because of the external environment and also sometimes what's inside of us. So thank you all for joining me. as we go into 2025, these are some things that I just want to leave you with. Right? Where are you on your roadmap? What does the deep end look like for you? What does it look like to give yourself a great pause, to have full permission? And then finally, think about that 1% change. What's the action? Right? You can practice it from now to the new year or starting from the new year forward. This will change the trajectory of your life. I'm so grateful for every single one of you for going on this adventure, this little journey, such a small microcosm of time. My wife Natasha and I, this is what we do. This is our life's work back on the farm. So to get to bring it here, thank you all, the Brands for Better team and community for having me. I'm always here. I'm always here for any single one of you. Thank you so much.
I told you it was going to be good. I want to change things up a little bit. I feel like entered a bit of a different state, right? The most natural thing would be to just get up and chit chat and move out of